Hello, friends, and welcome back to Echoes of Fear. Did you know that nearly 80% of people who watch these stories aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the strange, the chilling, and the unexplained, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. It truly helps the channel grow and lets these eerie stories reach even more curious souls like you. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed tonight's tale, and share your thoughts down below. I always love reading your theories. And one more thing, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city and country in the comments. It's always amazing to see how far these echoes travel. Now, turn down the lights, and let's begin. It started just past midnight, on a stretch of highway that most people avoid after dark. No street lights, no signs, just the desert, endless, silent, and flat. The driver was heading east, returning from Bisbee toward Douglas, Arizona, a two-lane ribbon of asphalt cutting through miles of nothing. His dash cam was running something he always did for work, a habit from years of long-haul driving. The clock on the dashboard read 12:43 a.m. when the headlights behind him appeared. At first, it was nothing unusual, a faint glow on the horizon, growing larger. But the light didn't pass. It stayed. A pair of beams hovering in his rearview mirror, perfectly aligned. He slowed down. The lights slowed down too. Then came the flash. Red and blue. The kind of color that makes your pulse change rhythm. He sighed, pulled over, and stopped his engine. The dash cam caught everything. The silence, the desert wind, the soft click of the hazard lights. For several seconds, the cruiser behind him didn't move. The lights kept turning, painting the road in red and blue reflections. Then, a door opened. A man stepped out. He was wearing a tan sheriff's uniform, old-fashioned, like something from the 1972. His hat was low, shadowing most of his face. He walked with slow, steady confidence, boots crunching the gravel. The driver rolled down his window. "Evenin', officer," he said. The man didn't answer right away. He leaned forward, flashlight in hand, sweeping the beam across the inside of the car. The light caught the driver's face, the dashboard. The small camera suctioned to the windshield. "You know how fast you were going back there?" His voice was calm, firm, not aggressive, but it had that practiced authority of someone who's said those words 1,000 times. The driver glanced at his speedometer. 55, I think." The sheriff nodded slightly. "Mind if I see your license and registration?" The driver reached over to the glove box. His hand shook a little, not from guilt, just from the strange quiet of it all. The desert had a way of amplifying stillness until even your heartbeat felt loud. He handed the documents over. The flashlight lowered. The sheriff looked them over, then turned slightly toward his cruiser. That's when the driver noticed something strange. The badge. It wasn't a patch. It was a metal shield, old and scratched, pinned directly into the fabric of his shirt, and across the top, engraved numbers 47. But there was no nameplate, no county seal, nothing. The sheriff turned back to the driver. "You work around here?" "Yeah," the driver replied. "I'm from Tombstone." The sheriff studied him for a few seconds, then said something that wasn't on any training script. "You should keep to the main road, son. This one's been quiet a long time." He handed the license back, tipped his hat, and started to walk away. The driver exhaled, relieved, maybe a little confused. But before he could say anything, the sheriff stopped mid-step. He turned back to the car window. "You've got someone waiting on you?" The question hit oddly. Personal. Unnecessary. "Yeah," the driver said. "My wife." The sheriff gave a slow nod. "That's good. Don't keep her waiting." Then he walked back to his cruiser. The dash cam showed the outline of the vehicle, boxy, with large chrome bumpers, like something from another era. The headlights flickered once. Then they went dark. The red and blue lights faded. The sound of an engine never came. The driver blinked, leaned out the window. The road behind him was empty. Nothing. Just the whisper of the wind moving through the desert brush. He got out, his shoes crunching on gravel. The smell of dust and cold air filled his lungs. He looked up and down the highway. Not a single tire track, no taillights, no retreating glow. He walked to the spot where the cruiser should have been. There were no marks on the ground, no sound of retreating tires. Only a faint buzz coming from his car radio like static, punctuated by a low, broken voice. Soft radio distortion. Unit 9, responding. The driver froze. He hadn't touched the radio. He reached inside, turned the knob, but the voice had already vanished. Later, when the dash cam footage was reviewed by investigators, that exact transmission would appear again faint, buried under static at 12:46 a.m. The timestamp matched the moment the cruiser vanished. Over the next 24 hours, the driver told his story twice, first to his wife, then to the 12 County Sheriff's Office. They were polite, professional, until he mentioned the badge number, 47. The officer at the desk frowned. "You sure about that?" "Yeah, I saw it clearly." He disappeared into the records room, came back 10 minutes later with a puzzled look. "There's no one with that number. Never has been. Not in this county." The driver offered to show the dash cam footage. They took it, copied it, studied every frame. The video showed exactly what he described: the cruiser lights, the man, the brief conversation. But when they enhanced the footage to read the license plate, it blurred, pixels shifting like the numbers refused to stay still. They sent the clip to state technicians. Same result. The report was filed as unsubstantiated traffic stop. No further action taken. But the story didn't end there. 2 weeks later, a deputy working the night shift on the same road claimed he saw the same cruiser, same shape, same lights, parked along a turnout. When he approached, it faded into the darkness. The radio recorded one thing before cutting out: Unit 9, Code 4. That call sign, Unit 9, hadn't been used since 1957. Sometimes, the desert holds on to what it's lost. Voices, footsteps, even duty. And sometimes, a man never leaves the road he swore to protect. What the driver didn't know was that others had seen him too. Reports stretching back decades, different names, same description, a sheriff with no department, and a badge that never existed. The driver's story should have ended there, another strange night on the highway, another tall tale to be laughed off at the bar in Bisbee. But it didn't. Within a month, 3 more reports surfaced. All described the same thing: a sheriff's cruiser with no identifiable markings, an old-style uniform, and a badge that caught the light like it wanted to be seen. The calls came into dispatch between 1989 and 2022, decades apart. Different names, same stretch of road, but every recording started the same way. "Yeah, I've got a unit with me. Looks like a sheriff." Then, silence, followed by static. The logs showed that no unit was ever assigned to those locations. No officers were working that beat. No cruisers unaccounted for. In Bisbee's small county office, there's a wall of dusty maps, yellowed, brittle, pinned together with old pushpins and masking tape. Across those maps, you can trace the sightings like scars. Highway 80, Highway 92, The dead corridor of double adobe road, all the same route, all the same hours, between midnight and 3 a.m. Locals began calling him the Sheriff of Nowhere, not as a joke, but as a warning. In a town that small, word travels through the same few hands: truckers, ranchers, bartenders, deputies who don't speak when outsiders walk in. Ask around Bisbee, and someone will tell you the story, always with a quiet look, as if repeating it too loudly might summon him. He's out there, they say, keeps the road safe, but not for you. Archival reports from the 1,970 seconds show a pattern. Each encounter followed a distress call or a broken-down vehicle, as though whoever wore that uniform was still on duty, responding to emergencies that no longer existed. Dispatch records mention fragments of conversations caught on open mics. Traffic stop on 92, Unit 9, request backup. But every time someone checked, Unit 9 wasn't listed on any active roster. It had been retired permanently in 1957. The Bisbee Sheriff's Office eventually archived the reports. The official statement labeled them as misidentifications. Unofficially, though, the deputies avoided that stretch of highway whenever they could. There's an unspoken rule among small-town officers. You don't chase ghosts, and you don't dig into things that feel finished. But some stories don't stay buried. They wait until someone looks too close. Would you trust a badge if you couldn't trace it to anyone alive? Over the years, stories spread like wind-blown dust across Arizona's borderlands. Different voices, same presence. A young couple traveling to Sierra Vista claimed they were stranded with a flat tire at 1 a.m. They said a patrol car pulled up behind them, an old Ford Galaxy, early 72nds make, still running with a deep mechanical idle. The sheriff helped them replace the tire, said almost nothing, then walked back to his cruiser. When the couple looked up again, it was gone. No taillights, no dust trail, no sound. Just an empty road. 2 days later, the husband checked the footage on his dash cam. There was no record of the cruiser arriving. No man. Only the husband and wife, speaking to someone off screen, their eyes tracking an invisible figure. Another report came from a trucker named Luis Marino, hauling freight through Douglas. He swore that a sheriff's car followed him for over 10 miles. Lights off, close enough that the reflection showed clearly in his side mirror. When he pulled into the way station to report it, the attendant looked confused. What cruiser? The cameras on the lot showed nothing behind him. When investigators froze one frame of Luis's dash cam, they found a reflection of a sheriff's star shimmering across his trailer door, the same 47 stamped across it. Even stranger radio interference often accompanied each sighting. Highway patrol logs recorded bursts of Morse-like tones, faint voices repeating numbers: 9, 47, 10 to 4. That combination didn't match any modern code. But dig back far enough into the 1,950 seconds patrol archives, it meant officer down, request status. People began treating that stretch of road like cursed ground. Some refused to drive it at night. Gas stations along the route closed early. And, among the local CB radio community, a new superstition emerged. If you hear the words Unit 9 responding, you kill your engine. You don't answer. You wait for the static to fade. Because every driver who ever responded vanished from the frequency list for at least 5 minutes, lost signal, no trace, no location ping. Their logs resumed exactly 5 minutes later, as if nothing happened. But their clocks were all off. by exactly 2 minutes and 57 seconds. No one ever explained why. It's easy to dismiss coincidence until you start counting them, until you realize the stories align too neatly. Different decades, same voices, and always the same man. Tall, calm, polite, with a badge that shouldn't exist. In 2003, a retired deputy named Harold Loomis reopened the case on his own time. He had served 32 years in Cochise County, and the story had always bothered him. The badge number, the call sign, the rumors that wouldn't die. Loomis spent months digging through microfilm records and forgotten storage boxes in the county archive. And that's when he found it, a thin folder labeled Incident Report 1957 Douglas Shootout. The report was brief. A sheriff named Thomas Hale had gone missing after a pursuit near Double Adobe Road. The suspect was never found. The sheriff's cruiser was discovered days later, doors open, engine cold, windshield shattered by a bullet hole. Inside, the dispatch radio had been ripped from the mount. On the ground nearby, they found only his badge number 47, dented and scarred by what looked like gunfire. The last transmission on record came at 3:07 a.m. Unit 9 responding. Shots fired. Then silence. No body was ever recovered. The case was marked unresolved. Loomis compared the coordinates of that 1957 shootout with the modern reports. They matched exactly. The same bend in the highway, the same mile marker. He drove there himself, one night, parked on the shoulder, and recorded an hour of silence. Nothing. No voices. No lights. But when he reviewed the tape later, the recorder captured 3 words: keep to the main roads. The same warning the driver had received 45 years later. Loomis submitted his findings to the sheriff's office. The response was quiet, short, and final. Case remains closed. Officer deceased in the line of duty. But the more he dug, the more he found subtle changes. Old yearbooks showing Sheriff Hale's face slowly vanishing in print reissues, his portrait fading to blank gray where others remained sharp. Official websites listing him as missing, then later retired, then gone entirely, as though history itself was rewriting the man out of memory. He contacted the state archives. They confirmed his personnel file had been lost in transfer. By the time Loomis realized he was alone in this, he already felt watched. He reported seeing headlights outside his home that vanished when he looked. Phone interference. Faint knocks on the porch after midnight. All things he couldn't prove. He kept a journal. The last entry reads, "If he's still out there, he's not after me. He's after whoever stopped looking." 2 weeks later, Loomis's truck was found abandoned near the same stretch of highway. Driver's door open. Headlights still on. Engine cold. Inside a single badge, dented and dull. Number 47. 3 years later, the department quietly sent one of its newer deputies to revisit the file for a training audit. His name was Caleb Meyer. He was 28, disciplined, skeptical, the kind of officer who trusted paperwork more than rumor. He took Loomis's notes home, mapped out the timeline, and decided to retrace the route one night to prove there was nothing there. His dash cam was live. His body cam recorded continuously. At 2:57 a.m., he radioed dispatch. Unit 12, en route to Double Adobe. All clear. The drive was quiet, only the sound of rain tapping the windshield and the faint hum of tires on wet asphalt. Then the static began. At first a whisper, then a voice, muffled, layered beneath the noise. Unit 9, responding. Meyer frowned, checked his radio. Dispatch, confirm last transmission. No reply. The clock ticked past 3:07 a.m. Headlights flared behind him. Red and blue flashed once, blinding in the mirror. He pulled to the side, heart steady, camera running. The cruiser behind him idled. Through the rain, he could see it, the unmistakable shape of an old Ford Galaxy. Lights rotating lazily, steam rising off the hood. Meyer opened his door. The rain hit cold. He stepped out, hand on his sidearm. "This is Deputy Meyer, Cochise County Sheriff's Office." No answer. The cruiser door opened. A man stepped out, exactly as the reports described. Tall, calm, tan uniform, the fabric darkened by rain. The silver badge caught a flicker of lightning. 47. "You shouldn't be here," the man said. "Roads closed." Meyer kept his flashlight steady. "Identify yourself." No response. "Name and badge number." "You already know." The recording ended there, a sharp burst of static, followed by a distorted heartbeat-like thump. The next frame on the dash cam showed only empty road. Rain still falling. No cruiser. No man. Meyer's patrol car was found at sunrise, parked neatly at the shoulder. Engine off. Doors locked from the inside. The seat was dry, as though no one had sat there for hours. On the passenger side lay a badge clean, untouched by rain. Number 47. They buried the badge again, this time in the county museum, under glass, marked as a relic from the 1950 seconds. Visitors walk past it every day. Some swear they can still hear a faint radio hiss from the speakers overhead, a low murmur repeating the same phrase. A win, problem, win, in every port. Win by, and win as. One problem. Unit 9 responding. The sheriff's office doesn't talk about the disappearances anymore. The official story remains unchanged. No evidence of wrongdoing, no confirmation of paranormal activity, just coincidence and folklore. But for the people who live near that road, coincidence doesn't feel convincing. They've seen the lights, they've heard the static in their radios, and sometimes, when the night is clear and the moon low, they say you can see the faint reflection of a cruiser's taillights fading into nothing. A reminder, a warning. Some say duty ends when the badge is laid down. Others believe it never ends at all. Out there, beyond the reach of dispatch and time, there's still a man in uniform, patrolling a road that forgot him, still answering calls that no longer come, still keeping the peace in nowhere. If you ever find yourself driving east from Bisbee after midnight, keep to the main roads. And if the red and blue lights appear behind you, look closely at the badge before you roll down your window. Do you think he ever left that highway, or is he still on patrol? Story 2. The Hollow Badge. It began with silence. The kind that doesn't sit still. One that stretches between the hills, rides on the wind, and fills every space where a siren should have been. For the people of Grants Hollow, Kentucky, that silence came after 3 ordinary nights, 3 separate drivers, 3 roadside stops that never ended. The first was on a rain-soaked Monday. A mechanic named Dale Roper. He left the service bay after closing, took the county highway toward home. and never arrived. His wife said she heard a police cruiser pull up outside around 9:40 p.m. The dash light flickered through the curtains, then faded. That was the last thing anyone saw. 2 nights later, another disappearance. A substitute teacher, Kimberly Lane, heading home from an evening class. She texted a friend saying she'd been pulled over by the sheriff for speeding. That message went through at 10:16 p.m. Her car was found idling beside the same stretch of road. Door open, engine still warm. The third case came 3 days later. A retired miner, Walter King, a man who knew every turn in those hills. Locals said if anyone could find his way out of a dark place, it was him. He didn't. When investigators reviewed the patrol logs, each stop matched a timestamp from Sheriff Leonard Price's cruiser. The sheriff, however, denied being anywhere near those scenes. Dashcam files confirmed his account. At least, they appeared to, until technicians noticed something strange. The footage from Price's cruiser wasn't continuous. Timestamps repeated, frames overlapped. It was as if one recording had been copied over another, looped in time. The discovery split the town in two. Some believed Price was being framed. Others whispered that he'd done it himself, that the job had finally broken him. The Kentucky State Police arrived the following week. They combed through records, dispatch tapes, GPS logs. Everything pointed to one impossible conclusion. Price's patrol car had been recorded in 2 places at once, between 9:37 and 9:41 p.m. The time of Dale Roper's disappearance, the log resets to 1,938. The department tried to explain it as corrupted firmware. Local news didn't believe it. Neither did the families. Within days, reporters descended on Grants Hollow. They interviewed anyone who had seen or heard the sheriff's cruiser that week. The accounts were inconsistent, but one detail kept repeating. 2 sets of headlights, one behind the other. Both marked County 06. The town entered a quiet panic. People stopped driving at night. Front doors stayed locked, even in daylight. And the sheriff, the man sworn to keep order, became the center of every whispered conversation in diners and feed stores across the county. By the second week, state officials held a press conference on the courthouse steps. Sheriff Leonard Price stood beside them, his eyes hidden behind mirrored lenses. When questioned about the patrol discrepancies, he offered a single sentence: "Those roads don't forget." He refused further comment. Behind the scenes, technicians continued analyzing the audio from his dash cam. What they heard was subtle, faint at first, a feedback tone buried under static. When isolated, it resembled a human voice. It spoke only one word: stop. But the voice wasn't Price's. At least, not exactly. Forensic experts traced the audio artifact across multiple recordings, each from different nights, different shifts, different patrols. The frequency was identical every time, down to the millisecond. It had the same pitch, tone, and breathing pattern as Sheriff Price, but recorded when he was miles away. The department sent the files to an independent lab in Nashville. Their analysis returned inconclusive. The waveform wasn't natural. It didn't behave like analog tape or digital compression. It moved sliding fractionally between frequencies, as if mimicking a voice rather than reproducing it. Price was placed on administrative leave pending further review. The disappearances remained unsolved. In small towns, fear doesn't roar. It hums low, constant, unspoken. By mid-October, Grants Hollow stopped asking for answers. They just wanted quiet. But quiet never lasts long here, because 1 week later, a local journalist began digging into the sheriff's history and found that Leonard Price wasn't the first man in his family to wear that badge. Rain intensifies. A cruiser light flickers, then cuts to black. 3 disappearances, 1 badge, and a timeline that refused to stay still. By the time the last reporter left Grants Hollow, the town had already chosen its villain and its ghost. Both wore the same face. Leonard Price had been sheriff for nearly 12 years. Before that, a deputy. Before that, a soldier. People said he came home from the war with steady hands and sleepless eyes, and even trade for survival. He'd walked into the courthouse in his pressed uniform, accepted the badge, and never looked back. Yet every photograph taken of him afterward seemed to carry the same weight behind the stare, as if he were still listening for distant artillery through the quiet of the hills. He ran the department by routine. Patrol at dusk, report at dawn. Same roads, same order. Grants Hollow liked that about him. Predictability, in a place where nothing else stayed certain. But somewhere between those familiar routes, something had started to bend. It began years before the disappearances, though no one marked the moment. Small things first. Duplicate entries in patrol ledgers. A night shift logged twice, then 3 times. The handwriting identical, but slanted differently, as though written from memory rather than habit. When questioned, Price dismissed it as clerical error. He preferred to keep records by hand. Machines, he said, made liars out of men. Still, every log told the same story. Roads patrolled, miles driven, hours that fit cleanly on paper. Until one didn't. A Thursday in early spring. The entry was brief. Patrolled Old Mine Road. 22, 14, 23, 5. All clear. Only the date was wrong. The page preceding it carried the year 1989. The one following, 1991. That single sheet stood alone, undated and unaged, like it had been waiting between years. No one noticed then. Why would they? Paper goes missing, ink fades. But when investigators later reopened those books, they found the same notation appearing again. Same hour, same road, scattered through decades of patrol logs, long before Price ever held the badge. The handwriting changed with each entry, yet the phrase never did. The town of Grants Hollow sits on a seam of old coal country. Beneath it, a lattice of tunnels stretches for miles, some mapped, most forgotten. Before electricity reached the valley, miners used oil lanterns to mark the shift's end. The last light to return was called the Keeper's Flame. If it didn't make it back, the foreman would ring the bell twice, a sign that the mountain had taken another man. Those bells stopped ringing generations ago, but the mine remained, sealed behind a rusted gate just beyond county limits. Price was often seen parked near that gate. Locals assumed it was routine patrol. Trespassers still wandered down to hunt relics or drink away nights. Yet no one ever saw him get out of the car. When asked, deputies said he called the mine his quiet post. They left it at that. Winter came heavy the year before the vanishings. Snow shut the town off from the interstate, and for weeks, the only light after dark came from the courthouse windows, glowing amber through frost. Price worked through every storm, chains rattling under his cruiser, wipers dragging across ice. He never complained, but people noticed his shift lengthened patrols, stretching past midnight. sometimes dawn though. Reports still showed 8 hours exactly. Once, a deputy followed his route out of concern. He lost radio contact near the old mine road. When the signal returned, he was back on Main Street, engine running, fuel half gone, with no memory of turning around. Price met him at the station, calm as ever, coat dry, thermos steaming. He told the deputy to log it as equipment interference. After that, nobody volunteered for the night shift. The investigation would later uncover fragments of his military file, enough to sketch the outline of a man who believed in order above reason, infantry, overseas, commendations for endurance, not heroism. He survived things others didn't and returned quieter for it. Neighbors said he lived alone by choice. House at the end of a dirt lane bordered by sycamores. Porch light never burned past 10. Mailbox always empty by morning. The only consistent visitor was the sound of a police radio, its static drifting from the open window, even when he wasn't home. After the disappearances, people looked back and started remembering details they'd ignored. The teacher at the diner who noticed Price always faced the same corner booth, even when the seat was empty. The clerk who said he bought double batteries every week but never carried a flashlight. The mechanic who swore he'd seen two cruisers pass each other on a one-lane bridge, both marked sheriff. In isolation, harmless stories. Together, they formed something colder, a pattern that didn't care about coincidence. During the internal inquiry, Price remained composed. No raised voice, no protest. He answered every question with the weight of a man accustomed to procedure. Yet beneath the calm, there was fatigue, not of body, but of repetition, like someone forced to recite the same day over and over, waiting for the words to change meaning. When asked where he was on the night of the calm, first disappearance, he gave the coordinates without hesitation. When asked again, hours later, he gave the same numbers off by a single digit. The difference placed him 6 miles closer to the mine. They confronted him with the discrepancy. He didn't blink, just said, "Maybe the road moved." The statement went unrecorded, but it stayed in every investigator's mind. Outside the courthouse, winter thawed. Snow receded into mud, revealing tire tracks frozen beneath. They led from the main road toward the hills, then vanished halfway, as though pressed into the ground by something heavier than any cruiser. A state trooper followed the line until it ended. There he found nothing but a half-buried sign, letters nearly eaten by rust. Hollow Mine Company, Est, 1889. That date would surface again later in Price's patrol logs, in his training records, even in the calibration data of his cruiser's camera, all marked 1889. The past wasn't leaking into the present. It was printing over it. People who knew Price before the badge said he had a sense for lost things. He could find a trail in the dark or hear a machine's fault before it broke. Some called it instinct. Others called it luck, but a few, mostly older miners, believed he'd inherited something from the ground itself. They spoke of an old superstition, the echo vein, a stretch of coal said to hum after a collapse, carrying the voices of those trapped inside. According to the stories, anyone who listened long enough could hear their own name spoken back. No one had mined that vein since the fire of '38. That number, again. The inquiry dragged on, public interest fading into exhaustion. Grant's Hollow returned to its routine shops reopening, reporters leaving, fear settling into the background hum of life. But those who lived closest to the hills began hearing it again, engines idling where no road led, radios murmuring through the static, the distant echo of a siren cut short. Price himself withdrew. His statements ceased. His patrols ended. He spent hours inside the station records room, lights off, listening to old tapes. Witnesses described him mouthing words in rhythm with a playback, as if reciting a conversation too faint for others to catch. When they finally locked the archives, he started keeping the tapes at home. No one knows what he found there, only that, weeks later, he requested extended leave citing exhaustion. The paperwork was never processed. Instead, he resumed patrol one last time, alone, without notifying dispatch. By morning, his cruiser was seen parked at the edge of the woods, lights off, trunk open. Inside lay stacks of cassette reels labeled by date, each one blacked out except the final. On its spine, a single word written in pencil, return. That tape was missing when investigators arrived.
The silent town of Merrow Ridge. There are places in America that disappear without a sound. Not abandoned, not destroyed, just gone. No record, no coordinates, no trace on any map. And yet, somehow people keep finding their way back to them. The story of Merrow Ridge begins with one man, a drone, and a stretch of desert that, by every satellite scan and the government survey, doesn't exist. The desert north of Phoenix is vast and unforgiving. Temperatures swing from burning daylight to frozen silence at night. No service towers, no power lines. Just endless ridges of red stone, broken tracks, and the ghost of a railroad that once carried copper out of the earth. That's where the signal cuts. Every time. Even pilots say their radios fade when they fly above it. Just a short patch of air where all sound disappears. A place people started calling the Quiet Belt. In June of last year, a drone operator named Daniel Rusk was hired to map that area for a solar development company. A routine assignment: mark terrain elevation, collect heat signatures, and capture footage. But what he found on that flight didn't match any terrain he'd ever seen before. It began with a flicker. On the drone's live feed, something sharp cut across the desert floor. Straight lines, corners, angles that didn't belong to the landscape. He tilted the camera down, and there it was. A town, an entire town. Dust-colored rooftops, a grid of narrow streets, a water tower leaning over a single main road. From above, it looked old. Maybe a mining settlement, the kind that dotted Arizona in the 19th century. But this one was whole. Windows intact, doors closed, every building standing in perfect alignment. Daniel's telemetry read 0. No name, no data, just blank coordinates. He zoomed in closer. The streets were empty. No cars, no people, no motion at all. Only one thing stood out. At the end of the road, beside a chapel, a flag moved slowly in the wind. Except there was no wind. He saved the footage and returned to base, convinced he'd discovered something extraordinary. A forgotten town, untouched by time. But when he mentioned it to locals in Phoenix, no one knew what he was talking about. An older rancher paused when he heard the coordinates. He said there was once a town out there. Merrow Ridge, founded in 1886. A copper camp that went silent after a sickness tore through it in 1901. The company shut down. The survivors left. Then the desert reclaimed it, every trace buried in sand. Daniel showed him the footage. The man went pale. He said, "That can't be. The ridge was leveled decades ago. There's nothing left." But there it was, recorded, time-stamped, undeniable. A living town where no town should be. When Daniel reviewed the video frame by frame, he noticed something else. As the drone passed over the main street, tiny bursts of light appeared inside the houses. Windows glowing, flickers in unison. One house after another. And with each flash, the drone's microphone cut out. No hum, no static. Just pure, heavy silence. He played the footage on loop that night, listening through headphones. Still nothing. The drone had captured video, but no sound at all. Even the usual mechanical whine was gone, as if the desert had swallowed the noise. The next morning, Daniel decided to go there himself. He followed the coordinates through the open plains until his GPS froze. Beyond that point, his compass spun aimlessly. But he kept walking. For hours, nothing but sand and the echo of his own footsteps. No structures, no town, only flat desert. He launched the drone again, same altitude, same coordinates, expecting to see what he'd seen before. The feed came through clean, for a moment, then static, a full blackout. The camera rebooted and the town was gone. The ridge stretched flat and featureless to the horizon. He thought maybe the drone had lost its position, drifted off course. He checked his bearings. Everything matched. Still no town. He panned slowly, sweeping the desert. Then, just for an instant, the image flickered. Shadows appeared. Rooftops, a water tower, the faint shimmer of windows. And then nothing. Gone again. When Daniel returned home, he tried to extract the footage. All the files were corrupted except for one. The last frame before the feed cut completely. In that frame, the drone's lens reflected the world below it. The operator's outline, the sky, the pale ground. And in the reflection, behind Daniel's shape, a face. Small, round, a child's face staring upward, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. No dust, no blur, just stillness. Technicians who analyzed the file confirmed that the reflection didn't align with the drone's surroundings. There was nothing nearby to produce it. No structures, no people, just open desert. The company shut the project down. Daniel's report was filed under equipment malfunction. But a few weeks later, hikers exploring that same region began to share strange experiences online. Church beneath the sand. In the heart of the Sonoran Desert, where the wind never stops moving and the dunes change shape with every passing season, there is a place the locals call El Silencio. The silence. No one builds there. No one camps there. Because every few years, when the storms roll through and the sand lifts high enough to blot out the sun, something strange happens. The land moves, and something old surfaces. Something that was never meant to be found. It began after a storm unlike any they'd seen in decades. 3 days of wind that stripped paint from cars and erased entire road signs. When the air finally cleared, a team of surveyors noticed something jutting from the dunes. A shape, hard and symmetrical, half buried in gold dust. At first, they thought it was a ruin, maybe a remnant of a mission long lost to time. But when archaeologists arrived, they realized this wasn't a ruin. It was a church, a Spanish mission, perfectly preserved, sealed beneath 15 feet of compacted sand. The roof intact, the bell tower standing, and a wooden door that looked as though it had been closed only yesterday. They called it La Misión de Santa Esperanza. No records of it existed. No maps marked it. Yet, in nearby towns, there were whispers. Stories passed down by grandparents who refused to speak of what happened there. They said there was once a mission that vanished overnight. A congregation of 37 souls who went to Mass one evening and never came back. When the search parties arrived, all they found was sand. Smooth, unbroken, as if the desert had swallowed the church whole. Now, centuries later, it had returned. The team entered carefully, stepping through the old wooden doorway into air that hadn't been touched since the 1700s. Inside, they found pews still standing in neat rows, the altar polished, the tapestries untouched. Dust hung in the air like breath frozen in time. And then they saw the candles. Each one stood upright on the altar rail, thick, white, and burned down halfway. Their wax still soft to the touch. But there was no heat, no smoke, just the faint scent of wax and something older. Something like incense and salt. Dr. Alvarez, the lead archaeologist, described the place as impossible. No oxygen should have kept the wood from rotting. No structure could have survived that long, buried under that weight of sand. But everything, every detail, was intact. As they explored, they found strange carvings in the walls, spirals of Latin prayers, all ending with the same phrase, in terra non amplius, roughly translated, no longer of this earth. One of the team members, a young researcher named Karina, noticed something else. Each pew had a rosary draped neatly across it. 37 in total. One for every person said to have vanished, and none of the beads were covered in dust. When the team reached the altar, they found a single golden cross resting at the center. It was ornate, heavy, decorated with red stones that caught the faint light from their lamps. Karina reached out and lifted it. The moment she did, something shifted. Faint at first, like the sound of air escaping from a sealed jar. Then they heard it, a soft trickle. Sand. It began to fall from the cracks in the ceiling, running down the stone like water through fingers. The walls groaned, deep, hollow, as if something enormous was breathing beneath them. Dr. Alvarez shouted for the team to move. But before they could reach the doorway, the ground tilted. The pews slid toward the altar. The air grew heavy, and the sand came pouring in. They scrambled for the exit, blinded by dust, their lights cutting through waves of brown and gold. Karina dropped the cross, but it was too late. The entryway collapsed behind them. When rescuers arrived 2 days later, they found only one of the archaeologists, unconscious, dehydrated, lying on the open sand. There was no sign of the mission, no rubble, no structure, just dunes, smooth as silk. Weeks later, when authorities searched through the equipment that had been recovered, they found one camera intact. It contained a single photograph, a shot of the interior, the altar, the pews, the faint light cutting through the cracks in the ceiling. And standing at the back of the church, near the doorway, was a row of figures. Dozens of them. Still, facing the altar, each holding a rosary. Experts said it was a trick of the light, overlapping exposures, dust distortion. But those who saw the original print said otherwise. The faces weren't blurred. They were detailed, eyes closed, heads bowed, waiting. A month later, a new storm swept through. And once again, the sands shifted. When it cleared, the area where the church had been was unmarked. Smooth, endless, silent. As if the desert had taken back what it had briefly allowed to be seen. Today, no one knows where La Misión de Santa Esperanza lies beneath the dunes. But sometimes, after the wind changes, the woman in the window. They say every desert town has something the maps forgot to mention. Something left behind in the wind, in the dust, in the quiet corners no one looks at for too long. In Coyote Wells, that something lives behind a single window. It's not a ghost story the locals tell anymore. It's one they try to avoid. Because if you ask about the old post office at the edge of town, they'll stop talking. Their eyes shift, their voices lower. And if you push too far, someone will eventually whisper, "You don't want to see her." No one says her name first. No one ever says it first. But they all know exactly who you're talking about. The pale woman who stares from the second window on the left. The one that faces the highway that doesn't go anywhere anymore. At night, when the air cools and the sand starts to move across the road, you can hear the metal sign of the old post office tapping against its hinges. Slow, uneven, like someone knocking to be let in. And if you're unlucky enough to look up at that window during one of those nights, you'll see her. Not moving, not blinking, just there. A thin figure behind the glass, skin almost colorless under the moonlight, hair that doesn't quite move with the wind, and eyes that don't seem to follow you. But you'll feel them long after you've looked away. The first recorded sighting was in 1953. A family traveling Route 71 stopped in town for gas and decided to take a few photographs. One of the abandoned post office, its faded U.S. mail sign still hanging above the door. When the pictures were developed, a face appeared in the second window. A woman's face, clear, expressionless, pressed against the glass. Her features too sharp, her eyes too still. The family swore the building had been empty. They'd looked inside. There was nothing. The sheriff at the time brushed it off as a trick of the light. But then the same thing happened again. And again. Different travelers, different years, same window. The same face. Long before that, in the winter of 1918, the town of Coyote Wells wasn't abandoned. It was alive. Farmers, traders, families, people who built their homes out of heat and hope. When the influenza hit, the small hospital filled up in a matter of days. They had no choice but to turn the post office into a makeshift ward. They cleared the mailbags, pushed the sorting tables aside, and brought in the sick. Dozens of them, men, women, children. And in the middle of it all was a nurse named Margaret Ellison. She wasn't from town, just passing through when the outbreak began. She stayed when others ran. She wrote letters for the dying when they could no longer hold a pen. She covered their eyes when they stopped breathing. And when her own fever came, she didn't tell anyone. By the time the others noticed, she was gone. Her name entered in the town ledger, her grave marked below. For decades, that word, below, didn't mean anything to anyone. Until 1987. a group of university historians came to document old buildings in the area. One of them, a woman named Clara Jameson, took special interest in the post office. She found it strange that there was no record of the building ever being demolished, but several notes about preserving the basement. She and her team pried open the back door, stepped inside, and found the floorboards warped, dust thick as ash. On the far wall, beneath the window, they discovered a narrow trap door sealed with nails and rope. They opened it, and inside, beneath 6 inches of packed earth, they found a set of human remains, still wearing a nurse's uniform. Pinned to the collar was a small metal tag, M. Ellison. The story made local news. For a few weeks, people came to see the building again, drawn by curiosity, by fear, by that strange pull old mysteries have. And for a short time, it seemed like the story had finally ended. They buried her properly in the town cemetery. They said prayers. They closed the post office for good. But that summer, a man driving through at midnight stopped for water and decided to take a picture of the boarded-up building, a kind of souvenir of the town's ghost stories. When he developed the photo, he noticed something odd. Even though the window was covered in plywood, there was a faint reflection. And in that reflection, a woman's outline, standing exactly where the window used to be. Since then, strange things have followed. Security cameras from nearby gas stations capture faint flashes of movement near the building. People claim their phones glitch when they point toward it, freezing, then showing a blurred figure in white for a single frame. A local hiker once said she saw the woman's reflection in her car window as she passed, even though the post office was miles behind her. The town council eventually decided to seal the building entirely. They bolted iron plates over the windows, poured concrete into the basement, and fenced off the lot. But the sightings,